This is Mr. Eugene, and today we're examining something that only men with decades of lived experience can fully recognize: the difference between words spoken in temporary frustration and words that reveal permanent incompatibility. There are certain phrases that sound harmless on the surface but carry a weight underneath them that only a man with enough life experience can fully decode. Senior men over 60 have that experience. They've heard enough, lived enough, been through enough to know the difference between something said in a moment of stress and something that reveals exactly who a person is at their core. Most younger men hear these phrases and dismiss them as temporary. She's just upset right now. This will improve with time, with communication, with patience, with couples therapy, with me trying harder. But a man over 60 has lived long enough to know that certain things don't improve. They reveal. And what they reveal on the day they're first spoken is exactly what they will continue to reveal every single day after that, if a man stays long enough to keep listening. Today we're examining 5 specific phrases that when a woman says them to a man over 60 are not warning signs requiring discussion, they're final answers requiring action. Why these phrases matter more at 60 than at 30. What each phrase actually reveals beneath its surface meaning. Why men with life experience recognize these as non-negotiable deal breakers. What these phrases have in common psychologically. And most critically, why any man over 60 who hears them deserves to trust his decades of pattern recognition and walk away without guilt, without explanation, without looking back. This is not about hating women. This is not about claiming all women say these things. This is about identifying specific reveals that men with experience recognize as incompatibility so fundamental that no amount of communication, compromise, or patience will ever resolve it. Stay with me. If you're over 60 and you've heard any of these phrases, this will validate what you already know, but may have been afraid to act on why this matters more at T60 than at T30. Before we examine the specific phrases, let me establish why these words carry different weight at different life stages. At 30, time feels infinite. A man at 30 can afford to spend years trying to fix incompatible relationships, believe that communication will eventually resolve fundamental differences, invest energy in relationships that drain more than they provide, stay in situations that diminish him because relationships require work. Give second chances, third chances, 10th chances, tolerate treatment he shouldn't tolerate because he has time to recover from the mistake. Time is abundant. Mistakes are recoverable. There are decades ahead to course correct. At 60, time is precious and finite. A man at 60 cannot afford to waste years on relationships that won't improve, believe that fundamental incompatibility can be overcome with effort, drain his limited remaining energy on people who don't value him, stay in situations that make his final decades miserable, continue patterns he's already proven don't work, tolerate treatment he's tolerated long enough at this stage of life. Time is the one thing that cannot be replaced, and spending it on the wrong situation is the most expensive mistake a man can make. Men over 60 have developed what psychologists call temporal perspective, acute awareness of limited remaining time that fundamentally changes decision-making. They can no longer afford to ignore reveals. They can no longer waste years hoping incompatible people will become compatible. When they hear certain phrases, they recognize instantly, this is who she is. This won't change. I can accept this or leave, but I cannot fix it. And increasingly, they choose to leave. Phrase 1, you're too sensitive. This sounds like criticism of emotion. What it actually is, rejection of your humanity. What she's really saying, surface meaning, you're overreacting, you're making too big a deal of this, you're being emotional about something that doesn't warrant emotion. Actual meaning, your feelings are inconvenient to me, your emotional needs make me uncomfortable. I need you to suppress your humanity so I don't have to accommodate it. Why this destroys relationships. When a woman tells a man over 60 that he's too sensitive, she's not describing a flaw in him. She's revealing a fundamental incompatibility between who he is and what she's willing to accommodate. A man over 60 who has finally learned to acknowledge his own feelings after decades of suppressing them, after decades of being told that men don't cry, men don't complain, men handle everything internally, deserves to be with someone who welcomes that honesty rather than weaponizes it. The moment those 3 words come out of her mouth, she has told him everything he needs to know about whether his emotional life is safe in her hands. It's not, and it never will be. This is not one-time comment. It's permanent policy. You're too sensitive is not an observation about a specific moment. It's a rule that will be applied every single time he expresses a need she finds inconvenient, shares a feeling she doesn't want to address, asks for something that makes her uncomfortable, demonstrates vulnerability she can't handle, has emotional responses she finds excessive, needs emotional support she doesn't want to provide, and the most painful part of that policy is that it doesn't get enforced loudly through arguments. It gets enforced quietly through sighs when he expresses feelings, eye rolls when he shares concerns, subtle withdrawal of warmth every time he's vulnerable, diminished affection when he shows emotion, cold distance when he needs support, contempt disguised as concern. Eventually he learns, my feelings are not welcome here. I must suppress them to maintain peace. I'm only acceptable when I'm emotionally invisible. Why men over 60 walk away from this? A man who has spent 60 years being told his feelings are inconvenient does not need to spend one more day with someone who confirms that message. He's already paid that price long enough. He doesn't owe anyone another single payment. He's finally learned, often through therapy, personal growth work, or the simple wisdom of age, that his emotional life matters, that feelings are information, not weakness, that vulnerability is strength, not flaw. And any woman who meets that hard-won self-acceptance with, you're too sensitive, has disqualified herself from his remaining years. #E phrase 2, you should be grateful I'm still here. This is one of the most quietly devastating things a woman can say to a man over 60, and it's designed to do one specific thing, make him feel lucky to be tolerated rather than worthy of being chosen. What she's really revealing, surface meaning, despite your flaws, age, circumstances, I've chosen to stay. You should appreciate that. Actual meaning, I view myself as superior to you in this relationship hierarchy. Your value is questionable. My presence is a gift you don't deserve. You should be grateful I haven't exercised my option to leave someone I consider beneath me. The power dynamic this creates, when a woman frames her presence in a man's life as something he should be grateful for rather than something genuinely mutual, she has revealed the entire power dynamic of the relationship in a single sentence. She doesn't see a partnership between equals. She sees a hierarchy, and in that hierarchy he is permanently below her, regardless of what he brings, what he gives, what he sacrifices. What this sentence requires of him, think about what? You should be grateful I'm still here, actually demands. It requires him to be thankful for something he never asked to receive on terms he never agreed to. He didn't ask for her conditional presence. He wanted genuine partnership. It requires him to suppress any dissatisfaction he might feel because the alternative, her leaving, is framed as punishment rather than mutual choice. It requires him to exist inside a relationship where his value is always contingent on her decision to stay rather than rooted in who he actually is. It requires him to accept that love is leverage she holds over him rather than something they share equally. It establishes that his worthiness is always in question while hers is assumed. Why this is especially devastating at 60, plus a man over 60 who has spent decades building a life, accumulated genuine wisdom through experience, developed real character through challenges, proven his value through decades of contribution, earned respect through consistent integrity, is not someone who should feel lucky to be tolerated. He is someone who deserves to be genuinely chosen every single day, not reminded that he should be grateful someone stayed. That reminder is not love, it's leverage. And a man over 60 knows the difference. Phrase 3, my ex never had this problem. This one is particularly insidious because it sounds like a comparison when it's actually a demolition. What she's actually doing, surface meaning, my previous partner handled this situation differently, better than you're handling it. Actual meaning, I'm using another man as a weapon to make you feel inadequate. I'm establishing that you're failing to meet a standard I've never clearly communicated. I'm more interested in winning this conflict than resolving it. Why this is relationship poison? When a woman brings a previous partner into a current conflict, she's not trying to solve the problem, she's trying to win it. And the weapon she's using is designed to make him feel inadequate by measuring him against a standard he was never given the chance to understand or meet, create shame about his approach, his personality, his way of handling situations. Establish her ex as superior in this specific area, and by implication, potentially others. Shut down his perspective, because clearly his way is wrong if her ex did it differently. Win the argument by making him defensive about his inadequacy rather than discussing the actual issue. What this reveals about her for a man over 60 who has already lived through the damage that comparison does to a person's sense of self-worth, this should be an immediate and non-negotiable signal to leave, not because he can't handle criticism, but because a woman who reaches for that particular weapon in a conflict has told him exactly what kind of fighter she is. She's the kind of fighter who goes for the wound rather than the resolution, prioritizes winning over understanding, would rather make him feel small than work together towards something better, uses past relationships as weapons rather than keeping them in the past where they belong, cannot be trusted to fight fair when conflicts arise, and that is not the kind of dynamic a man with 60 years behind him should be building his remaining years inside. The appropriate response. The ex who never had this problem is welcome to you, and I deserve someone who is entirely focused on the present we're building together, rather than using the past as a weapon to win arguments that should never have become battles in the first place. Phrase 4. You need to man up. 3 words. Some of the most damaging 3 words a woman can say to a man over 60. Why this is particularly significant at this age, a man over 60 has already spent decades manning up. He manned up through financial hardship, recessions, job losses, career setbacks, personal loss, deaths of parents, friends, perhaps spouse, health challenges, illnesses, injuries, declining physical capacity, professional failures, businesses that failed, promotions he didn't get, family crises, children's problems, difficult relatives, emergencies, every other difficult season that life delivered, without asking his permission. First, he has already proven beyond any reasonable doubt that he can handle what life throws at him. He has the scars to show for it. He has the history to back it up. He has the track record of a man who showed up when showing up was the hardest thing he'd ever done. He has survived things that would have destroyed weaker men. What? Man up actually means when a woman tells this man to man up, she is not motivating him. He doesn't need motivation to do what he's already spent 60 years doing, not challenging him to be better. He's already better than most men will ever be, not pushing him toward growth. He's already grown more than she can comprehend. Instead, she's dismissing everything he's already survived and everything it cost him to survive it. Using a phrase specifically designed to silence male vulnerability on a man who has earned the right to be vulnerable without apology, demonstrating that she cannot see him, cannot know him, and cannot value what he's already given. Revealing that she needs him to perform masculinity rather than be an actual human being with needs, feelings, and limitations. The cruel irony. A man over 60 who has finally laid down the performance after decades of carrying it, who has finally learned that vulnerability is not weakness, that having feelings doesn't make him less of a man, that asking for help is strength, is not going to pick that exhausting performance back up for someone who cannot even recognize the weight of what he's already carried for so long and at such great personal cost. What he deserves instead, he deserves a partner who sees the decades of strength he's already demonstrated, welcomes his vulnerability as intimacy rather than weaponizing it as weakness, understands that manning up is what he's been doing his entire life, recognizes that at this stage, he's earned the right to sometimes be tired, sometimes need support, sometimes be human, any woman who cannot provide that has disqualified herself. Phrase 5. Where do you think you're going? This one might seem less dramatic than the others on the surface, but it's arguably the most telling of all 5. What this question actually is, this is not really a question. A control mechanism disguised as curiosity, not seeking information but asserting authority. An assertion of ownership wrapped in the language of concern. I have the right to know and approve your movements. A challenge to his autonomy. You don't get to come and go freely. You need my permission. A power play establishing hierarchy. I'm the authority figure. You're the subordinate who must report. What it reveals about how she views him. When a woman asks a man over 60 where he thinks he's going, she's revealing something fundamental about how she views the relationship, not as a partnership between 2 adults with equal rights and equal freedoms, but as an arrangement where his independence requires her approval, his movements require her permission, his autonomy is conditional on her granting it, his freedom has a ceiling she controls. He's accountable to her in ways she's not accountable to him. Why this matters, especially at 60, plus a man over 60 who has spent decades earning the right to come and go as he pleases, built a life that belongs entirely to him, paid every price that life demanded, emerged on the other side with his dignity and character fully intact, finally achieved the autonomy he worked his entire life to establish, does not owe anyone an explanation for where he's going. Not now, not at this stage of his life, not ever again. What this question establishes, any woman who believes she's entitled to that explanation has already shown him exactly what kind of relationship she's offering, the kind where his freedom has a ceiling. He can be free, but only within limits she defines, the kind where his autonomy is conditional. He has independence only as long as she approves, the kind where he's free only as long as she decides he is. Her permission is required, And for a man at this stage of life, a ceiling on his freedom is not a compromise. It's not a negotiation. It's a non-starter. He has earned the right to walk out his door without a single word of explanation or justification to anyone. And any woman who cannot accept that has fundamentally misunderstood who she's dealing with. What these 5 phrases have in common. Now let me identify the unifying principle beneath all 5 phrases. They're not arguments. They're reveals these are not frustrations spoken in the heat of a difficult moment that deserve forgiveness, temporary expressions of stress that will pass, communication breakdowns that can be fixed with better dialogue, relationship challenges that can be overcome with compromise. These are reveals that pull back the curtain on fundamental dynamics. Phrase 1, you were too sensitive, reveals your emotional life is not safe with me. I will punish vulnerability. Phrase 2, you should be grateful I'm still here, reveals I see myself as superior to you. You should feel lucky, not equal. Phrase 3, my ex never had this problem, reveals I fight to wound, not to resolve. I use other men as weapons against you. Phrase 4, you need to man up, reveals I need you to perform, not be human. I cannot handle your vulnerability. Phrase 5, where do you think you're going? Reveals I believe I own your autonomy. Your freedom requires my permission. The common thread. All 5 phrases establish the same fundamental dynamic. She positions herself as superior authority figure who judges, controls, and conditionally accepts him. He is positioned as inferior subordinate whose value is questioned, whose autonomy is limited, whose humanity is inconvenient. The relationship is hierarchical, not partnership. She's above, he's below, permanently. And a man over 60 has too much wisdom, too much experience, and too much awareness of how precious his remaining time actually is to spend it inside a dynamic where he's permanently positioned as inferior to someone who should be his equal. Why men stay despite hearing these phrases is the most important question. Why do so many men over 60 hear these phrases and stay anyway? The conditioning of decades. They've spent so many decades being the ones who stayed when things got hard, tried harder when relationships struggled, gave more when partnership felt one-sided, believed that love required endurance rather than reciprocity, accepted that men sacrifice and women benefit, thought that leaving meant failure. This conditioning runs deep. It's not easily overcome even when recognizing you should leave. The fear of being alone. Many men fear starting over at 60 plus feels impossible. Being alone in final years feels tragic. Losing companionship, even if it's toxic, admitting they chose wrong, facing family, social judgment for leaving, so they stay in relationships that diminish them because the fear of being alone seems worse than the reality of being disrespected. The sunk cost fallacy. I've already invested 10/20ths, 30 years in this relationship. Walking away now means all that time was wasted. But here's the truth. Time already spent is gone, whether you stay or leave. The question is, do you want to spend your remaining time you can still control, in a dynamic that diminishes you? Staying to avoid wasting past investment means wasting future time, which is the only time that actually matters. The truth that 60 years should have taught. Here's what every man over 60 needs to understand. Leaving is not failure. Leaving a dynamic that diminishes you is. Not giving up, not proof you couldn't make it work, not a character flaw, not a sign of weakness, not something to be ashamed of. It's the application of everything you've learned about yourself, about relationships, and about what you actually deserve after a lifetime of showing up for everyone else. You've earned the right to apply your wisdom. Any man who has reached 60 with his values intact, his character developed, his self-awareness sharpened by decades of real-to-life experience has more than earned the right to apply that knowledge to every single decision he makes from this point forward, including and especially the decision about who he shares his remaining time with. These phrases are final answers, not warning signs. These 5 phrases are not the beginning of a conversation worth having, they're the end of one. And any man over 60 who hears them deserves to trust what 60 years of living has taught him about what they actually mean and what they will always continue to mean, no matter how many conversations are had about them afterward. Final thoughts. Your time is your most valuable asset. At 60 plus, time is the one thing that cannot be replaced. Every day you spend in a relationship where your feelings are dismissed as too sensitive, your presence is framed as something she tolerates rather than chooses, your adequacy is questioned by comparison to other men, your vulnerability is met with demands to man up, your autonomy is challenged with "where do you think you're going?" is a day you're trading for something that will never give you what you deserve. You've spent 60 years building wisdom, character, resilience, self-knowledge. You've earned the right to spend your remaining years with someone who recognizes that value, or to spend them in peace alone rather than in conflict with someone who cannot see what you've become. Your time is the most valuable thing you own. Spend it accordingly, and never apologize for knowing what you deserve. Drop a comment about which phrase hit you hardest. Have you heard these? Did you stay or leave? What do you wish you'd done differently? Subscribe, because this channel will continue identifying patterns that men with experience recognize, but younger men often miss until it's too late. Stay wise, stay clear, and never waste your precious remaining time on someone who doesn't recognize the treasure of who you've become.